The Forgotten Sentinel. The medical wing of Station Helios 9 had a particular smell, antiseptic mixed with recycled air and the metallic tang of despair. In the farthest corner of Ward D, behind 3 sets of security doors and endless stretches of sterile corridors, lay the remnants of what was once the most feared warrior in the Nexian fleet. Zenera Vale hadn't moved in 247 days. Her crystalline skin, once gleaming with the bioluminescent patterns of her people, now lay dull and lifeless against the medical pod's stark white sheets. The neural damage from the Battle of Crimson Gate had left her paralyzed from the neck down, her once lethal body now as still as the void between stars. The Nexian High Command had placed her here, far from the front lines where her legend had been forged, far from the whispered tales of the Crystal Blade, who had turned the tide in a dozen battles. They called it recovery. She called it burial. Quinn Donovan wasn't supposed to be in Ward D. As a Level 2 medtech, his clearance barely got him into the regular medical bay, let alone the high-security wing. But Quinn had never been good at following rules, especially ones that made no sense. Besides, the maintenance logs showed that nobody had checked the environmental systems in Ward D for 3 months, and malfunctioning life support was everyone's problem. He whistled as he worked his way through the security doors, using the access codes he'd borrowed from the chief medical officer's terminal. The first thing he noticed was the silence, not the normal quiet of a medical ward, but the heavy stillness of abandonment. "Hello." His voice echoed off the metallic walls. "Station maintenance. Anyone home?" The only response was the soft hum of medical equipment. Quinn moved deeper into the ward, his toolbox clanking against his leg. The monitoring stations were active but unmanned. Patient files scrolled across screens, vital signs beeping in steady rhythms, but there were no doctors, no nurses, no orderlies. That's when he saw her. At first, he thought she was a statue. Her skin had an almost translucent quality, with traces of crystalline formations along her arms and neck, characteristic of Nexian physiology. But it was her eyes that caught him, deep violet orbs that tracked his movement with an intensity that made him stumble. "Well," Quinn said, recovering his balance with a sheepish grin, "I guess someone is home after all." Zenera didn't respond. She couldn't. But her eyes never left him. Quinn checked her medical chart, displayed on a holoscreen beside the bed. His eyes widened as he read. "Holy stars," he whispered. "You're her. The Crystal Blade. I heard stories about you during the war. They said you once took out an entire Drachnid battle cruiser with just a fighter and..." He stopped, noticing the slight tightening around her eyes. "Sorry. Guess you probably don't want to talk about that. Or well, talk at all. Which, right?" He ran a hand through his perpetually disheveled dark hair. "I'm Quinn. Quinn Donovan. Med-tech, part-time maintenance guy, full-time pain in the administration's backside." Something flickered in those violet eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or merely confusion at this strange human who couldn't seem to stop talking. Quinn set down his toolbox and pulled up a chair. "So, want to hear something interesting? The environmental systems in this ward are actually fine. I just needed an excuse to check out why this section uses 3 times more power than any other medical ward on the station." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "And now I think I know why. They're keeping you hidden, aren't they?" Zenara's right eyebrow twitched slightly, the only movement her body seemed capable of making. But to Quinn, who'd spent years reading the subtle signals of patients who couldn't speak, it was like a shout. "Well," he said, standing up and cracking his knuckles, "their loss is my gain. Because I happen to be something of an expert at fixing things people think are broken." He walked around her bed, examining the neural monitors and life support systems. "Though between you and me, I don't think you're broken at all. Just, temporarily inconvenienced." He spent the next hour checking her medical readings, making notes on his data pad, and talking. He told her about growing up on a terraforming colony, about learning to repair complex machinery because new parts were always 6 months away by supply ship, about his theory that the station's head administrator was actually 3 small aliens in a human suit. Zenara couldn't laugh, but the tension in her face eased slightly, and her eyes remained fixed on him with an intensity that suggested she was absorbing every word. As his shift neared its end, Quinn packed up his tools. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said. "And the day after that. And probably the day after that too, until someone catches me or you get sick of my horrible jokes." He paused at the door. "You know what the difference is between a broken anti-grav unit and a smashed antimatter containment field?" He grinned. "About 3 sectors of space station." As he left, he could have sworn he saw the faintest glimmer of light ripple across her crystalline skin, like starlight on water. It wasn't much, but to Quinn, it was a beginning. That night, in his cramped quarters on the lower deck, Quinn pulled up everything he could find about Nexian neural architecture and advanced prosthetics. His small workbench soon overflowed with schematics and spare parts salvaged from the station's recycling units. He didn't know exactly how yet, but he was going to help Zenara Vale fly again. Because Quinn Donovan had always been good at fixing things, and he had a feeling that this forgotten warrior didn't need fixing at all, she just needed someone who could see past the stillness to the fire that still burned within. As he worked late into the artificial night, somewhere in Ward D, violet eyes stared at the ceiling, remembering for the first time in 247 days what hope felt like, breaking through silence. 2 weeks after discovering Zenara Vale in Ward D, Quinn Donovan had established what he liked to call a routine of controlled chaos. Each morning, he'd arrive carrying a toolbox filled with more prototype neural interfaces than actual tools, along with whatever contraband he'd managed to smuggle past security, usually exotic foods or entertainment modules that weren't strictly approved for high-security patients. "Today's special," Quinn announced, pulling a small container from his pocket, "is authentic Centaurian frost fruit. Cost me 3 weeks' rations and a promise to fix the chef's private still, but worth it." He held up the shimming blue sphere. "They say these things can make even a Voraxian tax collector smile, though I'm pretty sure that's physically impossible given their facial structure." Zenara's violet eyes followed his movements as he carefully cut the fruit into sections. Over the past weeks, Quinn had learned to read the minute changes in her expression, the slight arch of an eyebrow that meant skepticism, the barely perceptible softening around her eyes that indicated amusement. It wasn't speech, but it was communication. "Open up," he said, holding a piece of the frost fruit to her lips. "Trust me, it's better than the nutrient paste they've been feeding you." She parted her lips slightly, allowing him to place the fruit on her tongue. Her eyes widened as the flavor hit, sweet and sharp and cold, like tasting a frozen star. A ripple of bioluminescence cascaded across her crystalline skin, something Quinn had learned was an involuntary response to strong emotions. "Good, right?" He grinned, popping a piece into his own mouth. "Though I should warn you, it might turn your tongue blue for a few days. Found that out the hard way during my first year on station. Try explaining that during a formal inspection." As he spoke, Quinn began setting up the day's equipment. He'd been working on a neural interface system cobbled together from salvaged medical scanners and modified communication arrays. It wasn't pretty, most of his inventions looked like they'd been assembled by a drunk engineer during a solar storm, but his prototypes had a surprising tendency to work. "Okay," he said, attaching sensor pads to her temples and along her spine, "let's see if today's the day we make some progress." "No pressure though." "Well, maybe a little pressure. I did bet my dessert rations that you'd be moving something by the end of the month." The interface hummed to life, displaying a holographic representation of Zenara's neural patterns. Quinn had spent countless hours studying Nexian physiology, learning how their crystalline biology interfaced with their nervous system. It was fascinating stuff. Their neural pathways conducted energy more like fiber optic cables than human neurons. "You know," he said, making adjustments to the calibration, "I've been meaning to ask. That battle at Crimson Gate, the one where..." He gestured vaguely at her condition. "Well, the reports don't make sense. They say you deliberately flew into the enemy's defense grid." But everything I've learned about you suggests you're too smart for that kind of suicide run. Zanara's eyes clouded, the violet darkening to almost black. After a moment, her lips moved slightly. Quinn leaned closer, adjusting the vocal amplifier he'd installed. Saved them. The words were barely a whisper, forced through muscles that hadn't been used in months. Quinn sat back, stunned. It was the first time she'd spoken since he'd found her. Who? He asked softly. Who did you save? Transport, children. Each word seemed to cost her tremendous effort, but her eyes blazed with intensity. Refugee, ship. Behind, enemy, lines. Understanding dawned on Quinn's face. You weren't trying to attack the defense grid. You were drawing their fire away from the transport. He shook his head, smiling sadly. And let me guess, that little detail didn't make it into the official reports. A slight twitch at the corner of her mouth confirmed his suspicion. Military bureaucracy, Quinn muttered, turning back to his equipment. Same in every species. They love their heroes until they become inconvenient. He adjusted a setting, causing the neural display to shift colors. Well, their loss is my gain. Though I have to admit, my usual patients are more along the lines of malfunctioning food processors and cranky maintenance droids. As if on cue, the interface sparked, causing Quinn to yelp and jump back. Zanara's skin flickered with patterns that Quinn had learned to recognize as amusement. Oh sure, laugh at my pain, he said, sucking on his shocked finger. Just for that, I'm not sharing the contraband chocolate I smuggled in. He paused. Okay, that's a lie. I'm definitely sharing it. But I'll do it very grudgingly. The rest of the morning passed in a rhythm they'd developed over the past weeks. Quinn would make adjustments to the interface, run tests, record results, all while maintaining a steady stream of chatter about station gossip, technical theories, and increasingly terrible jokes. Zanara would respond with subtle expressions and, occasionally, hard-won words. But today was different. As Quinn reviewed the neural readings, he noticed something new, faint signals firing in pathways that had been dormant since her injury. Zanara, he said, excitement creeping into his voice, I want to try something. Remember how we talked about your species' crystalline biology acting like a natural conductor? Well, I've been studying some old research on bioelectric field manipulation, and I think. He was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside, multiple sets, moving with purpose. That's not good, Quinn muttered, quickly gathering his non-approved equipment. That's the sound of an official inspection, and I am very much not supposed to be here. The footsteps grew closer. Quinn shoved his prototype interface into his toolbox and pulled out actual maintenance tools, trying to look like he was doing legitimate work. But as he turned to leave, Zanara's voice stopped him. Quinn. Her voice was weak but clear. Tomorrow. He looked back at her, grinning despite his panic. Try and stop me. Though maybe through the service corridor next time. I'm thinking my dramatic entrance through the front door is getting a bit predictable. As he slipped out through a maintenance hatch, barely avoiding the approaching inspection team, Quinn's mind was already racing with new ideas. The neural readings he'd seen, combined with his growing understanding of Nexian biology, suggested possibilities he hadn't considered before. Later that night, in his quarters, Quinn pulled up classified files he definitely wasn't supposed to have access to. His eyes widened as he read about an experimental program involving neural interfaces and crystalline technology. It was dangerous, strictly prohibited, and exactly what they needed. He glanced at the small piece of Zanara's crystalline skin that had flaked off during testing, a sample he'd carefully preserved. Under his desk lamp, it seemed to pulse with its own inner light, like a star caught in crystal. Quinn smiled. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. The hidden project. The classified files glowed on Quinn's personal terminal, casting his cramped quarters in an eerie blue light. Project Resonance, the documents called it, a highly experimental program combining Nexian crystalline technology with advanced neural interfaces. It had been shut down 3 years ago after an incident that was heavily redacted in the files. "This is either brilliant or suicidal," Quinn muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. Empty caffeine packets littered his workbench, alongside scattered components and crystalline fragments. He'd been studying the files for days, sneaking in research between his official duties and his daily visits to Zenera. The science behind Project Resonance was revolutionary. It proposed using crystalline matrices as natural conductors for neural signals, essentially creating a bypass around damaged nervous system pathways. The applications for paralyzed patients were obvious, if it worked. A soft chime from his terminal warned him of approaching station dawn. Quinn gathered his equipment, including a newly modified neural interface hidden inside a standard medical scanner. As he made his way through the station's maintenance tunnels, his mind raced through calculations and contingencies. "Morning, sunshine," he called out as he entered Ward D through his now familiar maintenance hatch. Ready to try something either amazing or horrifically dangerous. Zenara's violet eyes fixed on him immediately. Over the past weeks, her condition had improved slightly. She could now speak in short sentences, though it clearly exhausted her. More importantly, the neural readings showed increasing activity in her damaged pathways. "What did you find?" Her voice was soft but clear. Quinn began setting up his equipment, talking as he worked. "Ever heard of Project Resonance?" "No." "Well, about 5 years ago, some very smart people had a very interesting idea about using crystalline technology to bridge neural gaps. Then something went wrong. Somebody probably got fired, and the whole thing got buried in classified files that I absolutely did not hack into." He held up his modified scanner. "But here's the thing, they were on the right track. They just didn't understand how Nexian biology could enhance the process. Your crystalline structure isn't just decorative, it's a natural conductor for neural energy. If we can amplify that conductivity and give it direction. Could work," Zenera said thoughtfully. "Could also kill me." Quinn paused in his preparations. "Yeah," he admitted. "That's definitely a possibility. Which is why we're going to start very small. Just trying to establish a baseline connection." He met her eyes seriously. "Say the word and we stop. No questions asked." A faint smile curved her lips. "Since when do you ask permission? Hey, I'll have you know I'm a very responsible rebel." He attached the sensor pads with practiced care. "I always read the warning labels before I ignore them." The modified interface hummed to life, projecting a holographic display of Zenara's neural patterns. Quinn had coded new algorithms to detect and map the crystalline structures throughout her body. On the display, they appeared as a complex lattice of light, interconnected with her nervous system. "Okay," Quinn said, fingers dancing over the controls. "Starting with minimal power. You should feel a slight tingling, maybe some." The entire display suddenly flared brilliant white. Zenara's body arched slightly, her skin erupting in waves of bioluminescence. Quinn lunged for the shutdown control, but before he could reach it, the light faded. The room returned to normal, except. "My hand," Zenera whispered. On her right hand, her index finger twitched. Just once, just slightly, but deliberately. Quinn stared, then let out a whoop that probably violated several station noise ordinances. It worked. Well, kind of worked. Worked a tiny bit, but still worked. He grabbed his diagnostic tools, scanning frantically. The crystalline matrix actually amplified the signal far beyond what I expected. If we can stabilize the resonance frequency. He trailed off, noticing Zenara's expression. She was staring at her hand, tears leaving glistening trails down her crystalline skin. Each drop caught the light like a tiny prism. "Hey," Quinn said softly, putting down his scanner. "You okay?" "First movement, in almost a year." Her voice shook slightly. Had forgotten what it felt like. Quinn sat beside her bed, his usual manic energy settling into something quieter. Want to try again? We'll take it slow this time. Maybe work up to a full hand wave. Really impress the medical staff they're not sending to check on you. Before Zanera could respond, an alarm blared through the ward, short, sharp and official sounding. Quinn's face paled. That's a security sweep alert. Someone must have detected the power surge. He began hastily gathering his equipment. I need to go, Zanera said firmly. They find you, project ends. Quinn hesitated at the maintenance hatch. I'll be back as soon as it's clear. And hey, he grinned, though worry still creased his forehead, great job with the finger. Next time maybe we'll try for a dramatic pointing gesture. Really add some emphasis to those silent judgmental looks you give me. After he left, Zanera lay in the quiet ward, watching the security team sweep through. They found nothing, of course. Quinn was too good at covering his tracks. But as she waited for their heavy footsteps to fade, she focused on her right hand, remembering that brief moment of connection, of control. In his quarters, Quinn was already modifying his designs, accounting for the unexpected power amplification. He'd have to be more careful, security would be watching for unusual energy signatures now. But he couldn't stop, not when they'd made such progress. His terminal chimed with an incoming message. Quinn's heart nearly stopped when he saw the sender, Dr. Revan Cast, head of experimental medicine. The message was brief but clear, interesting power fluctuations in Ward D today. Let's discuss your maintenance work tomorrow, 0800 hours. Quinn leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. Well, he muttered to himself, this should be fun to explain. He glanced at his workbench, where the prototype neural interface lay partially disassembled. Next to it sat the small crystal fragment from Zanera, pulsing softly with its own inner light. He had until tomorrow to decide, confess everything and hope Dr. Cast would understand, or find a way to keep the project hidden. Either way, he knew one thing for certain, he wasn't giving up on Zanera. Not when they were so close to a breakthrough. As station night fell, Quinn bent over his workbench, making adjustments to his design. If he was going to face the medical board tomorrow, he was damn well going to have proof that Project Resonance could work. The crystal fragment seemed to pulse in agreement, its light synchronized with the beating of his determined heart, wings of hope. Dr. Revan Cast's office was exactly what Quinn expected, meticulously organized, sterile, and about as welcoming as a Kraken's dental appointment. The head of experimental medicine sat behind her desk, her augmented eyes scanning through holographic readouts of yesterday's power fluctuations. Interesting maintenance technique, Mr. Donovan, she said without looking up. I wasn't aware that routine environmental checks required enough power to register on the station's main grid. Quinn shifted in his chair, acutely aware of the modified neural interface hidden in his jacket pocket. Would you believe I was testing a new type of air freshener? The ward really needed it. All that antiseptic, very depressing. Dr. Cast's augmented eyes fixed on him, their mechanical irises contracting. You accessed classified files on Project Resonance. You've been making unauthorized visits to a restricted patient. And you've been conducting illegal experiments with untested technology. She leaned forward. Give me one reason why I shouldn't have security arrest you right now. Quinn took a deep breath. This was the moment, play it safe or go all in. He thought of Zanara's face when she moved her finger, the tears that fell like starlight. Because it works, he said simply, pulling out his data pad. The crystalline matrix in Nexian biology provides a natural conductivity that enhances neural transmission. Project Resonance failed because they tried to replicate that artificially. But with a natural Nexian subject, he sent his research data to her terminal. Look at these readings. Dr. Cast's eyes flickered rapidly as she processed the information. Her expression remained neutral, but Quinn caught a slight widening of her pupils, surprise, maybe even impression. This is impossible, she muttered. The energy requirements alone should have. She stopped, studying a particular graph. How did you stabilize the resonance frequency? Used her own bioluminescence as a guide. Nexians don't just glow pretty colors, it's a complex system of bioelectric communication. By synchronizing the interface with her natural rhythms, you achieved neural bridge without rejection. Dr. Cast sat back, actually looking at Quinn for the first time. Clever. Reckless and illegal, but clever. She tapped her fingers on the desk. Of course, I'll still have to shut it down. What? But the liability alone would bankrupt the station. Not to mention the diplomatic implications. The Nexian High Command placed Commander Vale here for a reason. Quinn leaned forward. Yeah, to be forgotten. To fade away where she couldn't remind them that their perfect warrior chose saving refugees over following orders. He stood up, passion overriding caution. She's not just some failed experiment, Doctor. She's a person. A hero. And she deserves better than being left to rot in a forgotten ward because it's politically convenient. Sit down, Mr. Donovan, Dr. Cass said, but there was something different in her tone. What exactly are you proposing? Let me continue the research. Officially, under your supervision. We're on the verge of a breakthrough that could help countless patients with neural injuries. He met her augmented gaze steadily. You've seen the data. You know I'm right. Before she could respond, Quinn's emergency communicator buzzed, the one he'd given Zenera for emergencies. 3 short pulses, danger. I have to go, he said, already moving toward the door. We're not finished. Have me arrested later, he called back, breaking into a run. He took the maintenance tunnels at full speed, nearly crashing into 2 repair drones. Something was wrong. Zenera wouldn't have signaled unless. Quinn burst into Ward D and froze. 2 Nexian military officers stood by Zenara's bed, their crystalline armor gleaming harshly under the medical lights. Behind them, a medical transport pod hummed ominously. Transfer orders are final, one was saying. The commander will receive appropriate care at a military facility. No, Quinn said, loud enough to make them turn. You can't move her now. We're in the middle of crucial treatment. The taller officer's face hardened. This is a military matter, human. Your presence is neither required nor welcome. Quinn, Zenara's voice was strained but clear. Don't. He looked at her, saw the fear behind her violet eyes. Not fear of the officers, but fear for him. They both knew what a military facility meant, deeper isolation, no chance of continuing their work. No hope. Actually, a new voice said, his presence is very much required. Dr. Cast stood in the doorway, her augmented eyes glowing with authority. This patient is currently enrolled in a classified medical research program. Moving her would constitute interference with an official station project. She walked forward, emanating the kind of confidence that only decades of dealing with military bureaucracy could create. I have the paperwork right here, approved this morning. Would you like to explain to your superiors why you interrupted a potential breakthrough in neural recovery? The officers exchanged glances. We weren't informed. Clearly. I'll be filing a complaint about that. Dr. Cast turned to Quinn. Mr. Donovan, I believe you have some tests scheduled. Quinn tried not to show his shock. Yes, Doctor. Very important tests. Lots of complicated medical things that absolutely can't be interrupted. The officers withdrew, though not without suspicious glances. After they left, Dr. Cast turned to Quinn and Zenera. You have 3 months, she said crisply. Show me results that justify the enormous risk I'm taking. And Mr. Donovan? Her augmented eyes glinted. Next time you hack classified files, do try to be less obvious about it. After she left, Quinn slumped against the wall, heart still racing. Well, he said weakly, that was exciting. Zenara's skin rippled with relief patterns. Thought, they would take you away. Me? Please. It'd take more than a couple of crystal-plated bureaucrats to, he stopped, registering her words. Wait, you were worried about me? Someone has to, keep you, out of trouble. Quinn laughed, the tension finally breaking. Says the woman who got me into this mess in the first place. He began setting up his equipment with renewed energy. Now, since we're officially sanctioned and everything, want to try moving that whole hand? Maybe work up to a rude gesture for our militant friends? As he worked, Quinn glanced at Zanara's face. There was something new there, something beyond the hope of recovery. A spark of the warrior she'd been, awakening after a long sleep. They had 3 months to prove themselves. 3 months to turn a forbidden experiment into a medical breakthrough. 3 months to give a forgotten hero back her wings. Quinn grinned. They were going to need more illegal parts. Beyond the stars. 89 days could change everything. In the newly designated Project Resonance Research Ward, formerly known as the Forgotten Corner of Ward D, Quinn stood before a wall of holographic displays, each showing different aspects of Zanara's neural patterns. The crystals embedded in her biology now pulsed with steady, controlled light, no longer just reflecting her emotions, but actively channeling her will. Ready for the big show? Quinn asked, making final adjustments to the enhanced neural interface. Gone were the jury-rigged prototypes and salvaged parts. With Dr. Cast's support had come actual resources, though Quinn still insisted on making modifications that would have given the safety board collective heart failure. Zanara sat in a specially designed mobility chair, her crystalline skin gleaming with anticipation. Born ready, she said, her voice strong and clear. No more halting whispers, she'd regained full control of her vocal functions 2 weeks ago. Though your definition of ready usually means probably won't explode. That was one time, Quinn protested. And the explosion was very small. Barely singed your eyebrows. I don't have eyebrows. Exactly. No harm done. Their banter was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Cast, accompanied by a delegation that made Quinn's stomach clench. 3 members of the station medical board, 2 Nexian military observers, and, most worryingly, a representative from the Galactic Ethics Committee. Mr. Donovan, Dr. Cast said formally, though Quinn caught the slight encouraging nod she gave him. Are you prepared to demonstrate the results of your research? Quinn straightened his usually rumpled uniform. For once, he looked almost professional. Almost. Project Resonance has successfully integrated with Commander Vale's crystalline biology, creating a stable neural bridge that allows. Skip the technical brief, one of the Nexian officers interrupted. Show us what she can do. Zanara's skin flashed with patterns that Quinn had learned meant something very rude in Nexian culture. He bit back a grin and activated the interface. The holographic displays came alive with cascading data as the neural bridge engaged. Zanara closed her eyes, concentrating. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her right arm. Then her left. Her fingers flexed, caught the light, scattered it in rainbow patterns across the walls. The delegation murmured, taking notes. But Quinn and Zanara weren't finished. Commander, Quinn said, trying to sound professional despite his growing excitement, please demonstrate full mobility protocol. Zanara's eyes snapped open, violet and fierce. She pressed a control on her chair. The neural interface hummed, crystalline patterns flowing like liquid starlight across her skin. And then. She stood. The Nexian officers stepped back, crystal armor clinking in surprise. Dr. Cast's augmented eyes whirred as they recorded everything. The ethics representative dropped their datapad. Zanara took one step. Then another. Her movements were careful, measured, but undeniably real. She walked to the center of the room, turned to face the delegation, and smiled. Full neural recovery, Quinn announced, unable to keep the pride from his voice. The crystalline matrix not only conducts the neural signals but amplifies them. Her connection to her body is actually stronger now than. Impossible, the senior Nexian officer cut in. Our best medical facilities couldn't. Your facilities, Zenera said coldly, were not trying to heal me. They were trying to hide me. She walked toward the officer, each step more confident than the last. You wanted me gone because I chose mercy over blind obedience. Because I showed that your perfect warrior could think for herself. The officer's crystalline face hardened. You violated direct orders. To save children, Quinn interjected. He moved to stand beside Zenera, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. She chose to save refugee children instead of completing your precious mission. And for that, you left her to rot in a forgotten ward. Real heroic of you. The military implications of this technology, the other Nexian officer began, but Dr. Cast stepped forward. Are secondary to its medical applications, she said firmly. Project Resonance is now an official Station Helios 9 medical initiative. We've already received requests from 17 different rehabilitation centers across the galaxy. She fixed the delegation with her augmented stare. Unless you'd like to explain to the Galactic Medical Council why you're obstructing a breakthrough in neural recovery treatment. The ethics representative cleared their throat. The results are impressive. And the potential benefits to civilian medicine cannot be ignored. They turned to Zenera. Commander Vale, what are your intentions, now that you've recovered? Zenera looked at Quinn, a silent conversation passing between them. He nodded slightly, smiling. I'm retiring from military service, she announced. I've accepted a position as Chief Test Pilot for Station Helios 9's new Medical Response Division. It seems they need someone with combat experience and medical neural interfaces to test their new rapid response rescue ships. The Nexian officers sputtered protests, but they were drowned out by the ethics representative's enthusiastic questioning about civilian applications. Dr. Cast herded the delegation toward the door, leaving Quinn and Zenera alone for a moment. Chief Test Pilot, huh? Quinn grinned. When were you planning to tell me about that? Just did. Zenara's skin rippled with amusement patterns. Dr. Cast offered the position yesterday. Said something about keeping us both out of trouble. Ha! Like that's possible. Quinn's expression softened. You're really staying. Someone has to make sure you don't blow up the station. She reached out, took his hand. Her crystalline skin was warm, alive with flowing light. Besides, we have work to do. Other patients to help. More impossible things to achieve. Speaking of impossible, Quinn said, pulling a small device from his pocket. Remember that classified weapons research I absolutely didn't hack into? Turns out some of their crystal tech propulsion theories could be adapted for neural interface-controlled flight systems. Totally hypothetically, of course. Zenara's eyes lit up with the same fire he'd first seen in them all those months ago. Show me. As they bent over the designs, Quinn thought about how much had changed in 89 days. A forgotten warrior had found her wings again. A rebel engineer had found his purpose. And somewhere in between the illegal experiments and near disasters, they'd both found something neither of them had been looking for, a future that shone brighter than any star. Outside the ward's windows, the eternal night of space stretched away, filled with possibilities. But for the first time since the Battle of Crimson Gate, Zenera Vale wasn't looking at the stars with longing. She was looking at them with purpose. And beside her, already talking about his next definitely not entirely safe invention, Quinn Donovan was ready to help her soar again, one impossible achievement at a time. The crystal in her skin pulsed with light, synchronized with her heartbeat, strong and steady and free. No longer a weapon, no longer a forgotten hero. Simply herself. And that, they had both learned, was the greatest victory of all.